Brockhampton, The Family, and TM album reviews, plural. Let's chat about it. Hey friends, what's going on? John here from What's Spinning here tonight to chat about these two final albums from Brockhampton. Did not expect to be saying that a week ago. Texas-based hip-hop collective, self-proclaimed boy band, Brockhampton. You know who we're talking about here. You're getting Kevin Abstract, Matt Champion, Joba, Bareface, Don McLennan, Merlin Wood. Yeah, you know them ever since 2017 when they saturated, no pun intended, the hip-hop scene with their trilogy of saturation tapes, which at the time I was a little lukewarm towards. I mean, I certainly enjoyed them. They were easy to sit through. There were some fiery performances, but I was one of the very few that thought that they were getting better with each saturation release. I still have reservations on part 1 to this day. If anything, I'm more of a part 2 or 3 guy. But even after that, I wasn't completely sold on the collective, even though I did enjoy what they were bringing to the table. No, if anything, I was much more of a fan of Iridescence and what I think is their best album, Ginger. Both of these albums landed in my top 20 albums of the year, were front runners from my favorite hip-hop albums of the year. Hell, just thinking about tracks like No Halo is giving me the chills. Now, the last time we heard from the boys was with Roadrunner New Light, New Machine, which I did enjoy overall, but there were some stylistic choices on the album, specifically in the second half, that I personally questioned a little bit. I didn't know what they were doing. I didn't really know the direction they were going. I still loved the album, though. I mean, Buzzcut is just an absolute monster of a track in its own. Now, this has been hyped up for quite some time. The Family is supposed to be their final album, the finale to their real strong artistic last couple of years. But as I was typing that in my notes here, they announced that they were going to be releasing one more album as well, the TM album. Now, spoiler alert, this is going to be a long review because I'm going to be tackling both projects here, starting with The Family. Now, they dropped a few singles leading up to it, which I did enjoy, but my initial reaction was, this is very different and I need to hear it in the grand scheme of the album. And now that I have, I mean, The Family is hard to read. I mean, take it back. This starts off the album, and I think it's a pretty classy start. I love the chopped up soul sample. Give me more of that. This reminds me of the sort of hip-hop that I would have grown up with, very much so, with a little bit more southern flair than usual as well, which is something that I enjoy quite a bit about it. And on this track, Kevin Abstract sounds all sorts of hyped up, and he better be, because he is the only Brockhampton member that is featured on The Family, outside of a few phone messages and sort of outro tracks. And I have thoughts on that, but we will certainly get to it. I mean, as far as an autobiographical account of the boy band that is Brockhampton, you're not going to get much more emotional than this. Get used to hearing that. I could say a lot of the same things about RZA. A lot of the beats and the production on this album have a way of staying fresh, sounding new and exciting, but also tug at some of my heartstrings. Chopped up soul samples, glistening synths, pounding drums, it's great. And thankfully, for the moment, Kevin has a lot of interesting things to say, certainly some hot takes, enough to really carry this project. For the most part, The Family is a thrilling and certainly compelling account of Brockhampton. Gold Teeth, for me, I think it's my favorite track on The Family. I love this gritty, grimy beat and just how pissed off and riled up Kevin sounds. I mean, I've known that Brockhampton were having some issues amongst their members for quite some time now, but hearing this laundry list in full effect and on full display, it's pretty eye-opening. The intensity here and the lyrical content for Brockhampton fans alone is going to make this a must-listen. Big Pussy was one of these singles leading up to this album, and it certainly is a wild-eyed and exciting one. It is a fluid, constantly shifting jazz rap tune that is just as full of personality and color as this album art. And it shows the increasingly fired up and intense Kevin Abstract, and that's something that I do really like about this project as well. If anything, I can't wait to hear what Kevin does as a solo artist, while I do still obviously miss the contributions from other members. And as cheesy as all that is, and you may absolutely hate it, I actually think it's pretty great. I mean, if you want to talk about wearing your heart on its sleeve and just airing out everything that you're feeling, you're not going to find a much more honest person in hip-hop than Kevin Abstract is on this project. But outside of that, this is a classy track, including the interpretation of the All That theme song. This is far from the project that I was expecting, very far from what I was expecting, but that doesn't mean it's bad. Southside, on the other hand, is a grimy, harsh banger. It's got a noisy, wild beat to it. I mean, the beats and the production on this entire tape really do touch down on a lot of different styles, and that makes it pretty exciting at times. But it's Kevin's performance, his confidence, his enigmatic nature that really ties this together. Now, that leads me to some of the weirder moments on this album. I mean, despite the fact that we're only getting one member of Brockhampton on this entire tape, which is certainly odd in its own right, outside of that, there's some weird left turns that I think should not have been touched. Like, we get Back from the Road, and this is a sort of lo-fi, stripped-down interlude, and it's one that should have been left to honestly just off this album. It doesn't have a lot of substance, and yes, it's still kind of revealing at times, very personal, but does it really have to be so boring? And Basement, I mean, like I said, this album is touching down on a lot of ground stylistically, but we get to moments like this, and it's just such a mishmash. And like I said, it can lead to some very exciting, colorful moments, but then we get this with its industrial, noisy, loud beat, which I actually think is pretty cool. But Kevin's performance here is easily one of his most lukewarm and average here. Also, a little bitter. I heard the incredibly lavish, loud, larger-than-life soul sample on Good Time, and I actually got the chills. Once again, this very low-key, low-energy spoken word performance is just not cutting it for me. It ends up being a sloppy mess of colorful gloop, and yes, there are some good ideas here, but they're not executed well, and it's a real shame because we get like those final moments about the Zoom call, and I was just like, wow, that hit really hard. I wish it was incorporated on another track. Really not into 37th either. I mean, this dreary, sad boy beat is something that I'm always going to enjoy from Brockhampton, but the rest of this track should have been left on the cutting room floor. Lyrically, though, I'm not completely invested. I mean, it certainly got a lot of emotion to it. In that case, it's like a thrill ride. I'm just not that fascinated by it. And then we get My American Life, which is just a sound that I wish Kevin pushed further. I really don't hate the stripped down lo-fi vibes. It's actually pretty cool and unique. Like, it comes off unfinished to me. Like, if this was a 3-minute track, at least, he could have spread his wings a little bit, but this just comes off as unfinished. Demo quality, even, which is something I never say about Brockhampton. But while I have my issues, and I certainly had a few, this is still a must-listen for the project and its fans. Boyband is just so obviously good. I love the energy on this track. It's a little off the walls. I love how colorful it is, and once again, the lyrical content of this album alone will make mega fans drool. Any Way You Want Me, easily one of my favorite deep cuts. The lo-fi production, the stripped-down feel, Kevin's performance, it's all gravy. It's emotional and it's telling, but it's also one of the most easy to take in and relatable tracks here. The family just seems necessary to fill in a lot of gaps. I love the classy soul sample beat, and the production is stellar. And most importantly, we're 15 tracks in, and it feels like emotionally we're just getting deeper and deeper, which is something I did not expect. And by the end of this track, Kevin just sounds so hurt and defeated and raw. It's commendable. And this might just be me, but I needed that bareface outro so much. And while Prayer is a little bit more straightforward, it's commendably raw. Like, this came from the heart, and so much of this project did, but this to me just, takes the sort of gospel sounds in the second half of Roadrunner that I was questionable about and makes them actually come off really nice. Then we have the ending, which makes this feel like a happening, like, I think, final album. And then I hear this, and yeah, I get it. I get that feeling. Classy production, a soul sample to die for, and honestly, one of Kevin's most confident tracks here. I can't think of anything I hate about this track. It's just, very short, very sweet, but really powerful. And as a finale goes, Brockhampton is such a left field track. Like, it is a sharp left turn, and it is an emotional thrill ride. If you are a mega fan, you're going to want some tissues here. I mean, shit, in the final moments, even I was tearing up a little bit. It's just as raw, telling, and autobiographical as a lot of this album is. And yes, this is by far the longest track here, but I think it kind of works. And some of the one-liners, including, like, the final minute, it's pretty stellar. So that leads me to my thoughts on The Family, and I have many. It feels to me like almost like you're watching a documentary on Brockhampton, and this is the soundtrack. This is what they're giving you as the soundtrack, and in a lot of ways, it is raw, emotional. It is a gut punch of an album, and if you are a mega fan, you are going to want to eat this up, and if you're a casual fan, you might get thrown off a little bit by this. But I think if you're a fan at all, this is required listening. Now, as far as a tuneful album from Brockhampton goes, and a project goes, I'm feeling a light 7 on this album. Because it didn't, like, blow me away. I mean, yeah, it's emotionally, like, a gut punch, but this doesn't feel like a Brockhampton album. This feels like a Kevin Abstract album. Or, like I said, the soundtrack to a Brockhampton documentary. A really good one. Which leads me to the second album here that we're going to be chatting about. Their TM album that dropped on Friday morning. And at this point, I want to say, if you're still with me, thank you for putting up with me. There's a lot of content in this video, and I appreciate you. Let me start off by saying that TM is a much more of a Brockhampton project. If we're comparing this to The Family, TM is the much more tuneful, thrilling sister album. This album starts off with FMG, and not for nothing, I needed this. This is a wonky left field banger with all the bass you could ask for. It is absolutely bumping in the weird left field production and the addition of the other members of Brockhampton. I needed this. It's exciting, genuinely thrilling, and while apparently the majority of these tracks on this album are quote unquote unfinished, you would not think so. Yeah, it's a hell of an intro, FMG, and if I craved a track like that, I really craved a track like Animal, this sort of alternative R&B tune that Brockhampton has perfected. Shit, this track is so good. It's so good. I think it's the best track here. The hook is intoxicating, the performances are emotional. This is all I could have asked for from one last helping of Brockhampton. This sounds like where they should be, one last hurrah in these genres, and it's good. It almost brings a tear to my eye, and the final moments of all the synth solos, like, right on, man. Then we have Listerine, and look, I'm just gonna be, like, very, very honest with y'all. Half of the tracks on TM here, as unfinished or unpolished as they sound, I like better than half of Roadrunner. And I know that's a spicy take, but I'm sticking to it. This is just such a great sad boy alternative R&B track with a booming beat. It is simply intoxicating and a phenomenal cut. New Shoes, on the other hand, does hit a little bit harder. The entirety of Brockhampton sounds amped up. Like now, I'm the one who's getting emotional. I mean, Matt Champion's verse here sounds as crisp as ever. Kevin sounds fantastic. Merlin Wood, my God, his charisma on this track alone is so damn good. This track is so great, and Merlin's line about selling everything but pussy and his soul, it's a great line. For my taste, as a project, I'm infinitely more invested in TM. And while I'm talking about something fired up and a little angsty, God, I mean, it just keeps going. Keep It Southern is freaking great. I love the stripped down piano instrumental. I mean, it brings in a serious drama to this album. So much so that when the booming beat finally does pop in, we get nothing short of 2 minutes of great Southern hip hop. And luckily for me, I don't have a lot of bad things to report. I mean, better things for me is a piss poor ballad. Like, they are so good at tracks like this. Just hearing this phoned-in performance is depressing. This, to me, is 3 minutes of incomplete filler. Like, you know, when I hear that these tracks are incomplete and I hear this, I'm like, yeah. And Crucify Me is bottom of the barrel. I think it's the worst track here. This, to me, is a sign that maybe things are falling apart and the writing is on the wall. Like, remember, like, when I was talking about some of those later moments on Roadrunner that I personally wasn't into? Well, here you go. It's really not well written, it's sluggish, and it's just heartless, honestly, which are things I never say about the band. Outside of that, though, I certainly might be in the minority, but TM, for me, is the finale that I wanted. Man on the Moon, I don't even know how he got here. This is an upbeat, dance-heavy track with some disco flair to it, which sounds terrible on paper, but the band makes it work. It is way too catchy for its own good. It is sharp. It is insanely memorable. Just know that it will not be for everyone. Trust me. Duct Tape? I think it's my favorite track on this entire project. I love this gritty, bleak, dirty instrumental. And Merlin's performance, like, God, this may be the best one that he's put out in a while. To me, this is a great medium for the band. It's emotional, but it's also dark and heavy, but it's also really telling. It's shockingly dark, impeccably real, and has a really mesmerizing hook as well. With Always Something, they prove that they have incredibly so mastered the sad boy alternative R&B sound. It's emotional and tuneful, but just as much of a personality-driven track as well. And, like, I'm literally, once again, getting very emotional. To me, this is a proper finale. And Goodbye, it might just be a little bit too stripped down for you, and if it is, I get that. But this is the emotional, tender finale that I feel like Brockhampton truly deserve. It seems appropriate. It seems right. And for me, The Family and TM are two very different projects. The Family is much more autobiographical. It is going to be for the mega fans, and if you are a mega fan, you will drool at the amount of content and telling lyrics and intensity of the project. But if you are into maybe a little bit more of a tuneful experience, a more authentic experience that wraps things up with a little bow, then I think TM is the way to go, at least for my tastes. Because when it comes to TM, I'm feeling a decent 8 on it, and I really, really, really do love what they were doing on that. And if this really, truly is the end of Brockhampton, I think they really did end things off nicely with TM. But that's just my thoughts. I know that's a lot of them. Thank you for sitting with me and listening to this all. Let me know what you all think down below. If you liked the video, be sure to give us a like, give us a subscribe, and let me know down below what you would like for me to chat about in the future. And until next time, have a great day, friends.